Well, in his sharply effective State of the Union address last week, President Biden included the best tax policy speech ever given by a Democrat.
Folks at home, does anybody really think the tax code is fair? Do you really think the wealthy and big corporations need another $2 trillion tax break? I sure don't. I'm going to keep fighting like hell to make it fair.
President Biden has been using some of the best lines, most effective lines from his State of the Union address on the campaign trail, beginning the day after the State of the Union. Here's how he began his appeal on taxes today in New Hampshire.
Does anybody here think the tax code is fair? Raise your hand. Well, I don't think so either.
Republicans oppose everything that Joe Biden is proposing on taxes, everything. And so the Biden proposals for a tax code that is more fair depend entirely on our first guest tonight becoming the next Speaker of the House in January. And that depends on you, the voters, electing a majority of Democrats to the House of Representatives. The Democratic leader of the House of Representatives, Hakeem Jeffries, needs only 4 more seats of Democrats in the House of Representatives to elect him Speaker of the House. He will be the first Speaker of the House from New York City, which is kind of remarkable that there's never been a Speaker from New York City. And of course, he will be the first Black Speaker of the House. The United States Constitution has exactly one parliamentary rule for legislation. Quote, all bills for raising revenue shall originate in the House of Representatives. That means all tax bills have to begin in the House. It will be up to Speaker Jeffries to guide the Biden tax fairness bill through the House of Representatives, which includes affordable increases in taxes only for people making over $400,000 a year and additional tax increases for billionaires, as well as increases in corporate taxation that still leaves the corporate tax rate lower than it was during the Clinton presidency when the economy was thriving. And while he's at it, Speaker Jeffries will have to guide all of the rest of the Biden legislative agenda through the House of Representatives. But if Hakeem Jeffries is not Speaker of the House next year, then a Republican Speaker will continue to either operate a do-nothing Congress or try to impeach members of the administration or try to take away from the people who take things away from the people who Joe Biden's new budget released today would protect.
Many of my Republican friends want to put Social Security and Medicare back on the chopping block again. If anyone tries to cut Social Security, Medicare, or raise retirement age again, I will stop them. Even this morning, Donald Trump said cuts to Social Security and Medicare are on the table again. The bottom line is he's still at it. I'm never going to allow that to happen. I won't cut Social Security. I won't cut Medicare.
And here's what Donald Trump said on CNBC today about cutting Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid.
So first of all, there is a lot you can do in terms of entitlements, in terms of cutting.
And of course, later, the Trump campaign issued a statement claiming that Donald Trump was only talking about cutting waste in those programs. And I know everyone thinks there is waste in all government programs, but no one has ever identified any waste in the Social Security program that can be cut or in Medicare. It's worth comparing Medicare to private health insurance. In private health insurance, 17% of the premiums that you pay for private health insurance are not used for health care. They are used purely for administrative costs, executive salaries, and in insurance companies, that also includes advertising costs, massive advertising costs. In Medicare, where the advertising costs are zero, the government-run health insurance program, everything the Republicans have always told you that would lead you to expect that the administrative costs of Medicare, must be much, much higher than private insurance. And again, in private health insurance, the administrative costs, including advertising, are 17%. And in Medicare, the administrative costs are 2%. 2. Making Medicare simply the most efficient health insurance program in the world. Donald Trump is lying about cutting waste from Medicare, and the proof that he is lying about that is that in his 4 years in the presidency, he never once attempted to cut any waste from Medicare because his people couldn't find any, and he never attempted to cut any waste from Social Security because his people could not find any. Nor did he try to cut any waste from Medicaid. What Donald Trump said about cutting those programs today was very, very clear. But of course, Donald Trump's presidential campaign knows that it was a very stupid thing to say politically, and so the campaign is now trying to pretend that Donald Trump meant something else. But Donald Trump has said stupider things. In a new book by Jim Sciutto, Donald Trump's third White House chief of staff, John Kelly, tells this story about Donald Trump, quote, he said, well, but Hitler did some good things. I said, well, what? And he said, well, Hitler rebuilt the economy. And I said, sir, you can never say anything good about the guy. Nothing, Kelly recounted. Trump also expressed admiration for Hitler's hold on senior Nazi officers. He would ask about the loyalty issues and about how, when I pointed out to him the German generals as a group were not loyal to him and in fact tried to assassinate him a few times, and he didn't know that, Kelly recalled. After visiting with Donald Trump in Florida on Friday, Hungary's Prime Minister Viktor Orban said that Trump, quote, will not give a penny in the Ukrainian-Russian war. That is why the war will end, because it is obvious that Ukraine cannot stand on its own feet. If the Americans don't give money and weapons along with the Europeans, then the war is over. The same thing was true of Britain when Hitler invaded all of Western Europe and after conquering France was determined to soon have Nazi troops marching into London the way they marched into Paris. And the only way the British survived, the only way, was with military supplies delivered to them by the President of the United States, Franklin Delano Roosevelt, who Joe Biden quoted at the very beginning of his State of the Union address on Thursday, in a speech that President Roosevelt made explaining to the American people why we needed to help the British survive Hitler's attack. The Roosevelt speech that Joe Biden quoted was given a year before the United States was attacked by Japan and then actually entered World War II as a participant in the combat. If Donald Trump had been in the presidency in 1941, when the British needed help to survive, Hitler would have won. We know Donald Trump's father was a Hitler sympathizer. Donald Trump admires every current head of state in the world who exhibits Hitlerian tendencies, like Kim Jong-un in North Korea and Vladimir Putin in Russia, and in his way, Viktor Orban in Hungary. The day after Donald Trump praised Viktor Orban for his dictator-like behavior in Hungary, Joe Biden said this in Georgia.
Here's a guy who's kicking off his general election campaign on the road up with Marjorie Taylor Greene. It can tell you a lot about a person who he keeps company with. And yesterday, he was hosting at his club Viktor Orban, who says he doesn't think democracy works. Call him a fantastic leader. Seriously. He bragged about calling Xi Jinping a king. He called Putin, and he said, do whatever the hell you want to our allies. I'm not making these quotes up. When he says he wants to be a dictator, I believe him.